We're excited about getting this season started, get the challenge of going to a divisional opponent in their place.
We're preparing to win every single weekend, so it doesn't matter who's on our schedule. We want to play really well. Really good defense, bunch of talented players, so we just got to have a good plan and focus on what we do well and go out and execute it.
It's always huge to be able to start off on the right foot, but let alone it's AFC North football. There is a lot of weight behind this game, and that's not lost in the shuffle.
Hi everybody, I'm Missi Matthews and welcome to the Matchup Show presented by Unibet. It is week one finally here and I have a great group of panelists to help you get ready for Steelers and Bengals, a Sunday 1 p.m. kickoff at Paycor Stadium. Mike Prisuta of the DVE Morning Show and Steelers.com is here. I know he's ready to go. And we have two former Steelers legends, offensive lineman Max Starks, also with the Steelers Radio Network, and Hall of Famer Arthur Moats. We have to start out strong, Moats. You know, we like to brag that we have a Hall of Famer on our crew. But this is a big game for the Steelers, for the Bengals. They were able to reach the Super Bowl and, you know, get rid of that 31-year drought without having a playoff win. So let's start with the obvious. Let's talk some quarterbacks. And Mike, is Joe Burrow, knowing what they were able to accomplish, or Mitch Trubisky, knowing who he's replacing and what they need to do here, under more pressure on Sunday?
You know, I think it's relative. I'm guessing all NFL quarterbacks are under a great amount of pressure. Trubisky is in a different place in his career than Burrow. But to me, there is more pressure on Joe Burrow in Cincinnati because of that run to the Super Bowl that you mentioned. The Bengals not only got there, guys, they came pretty close to winning it. I think expectations are sky high in Cincinnati, and they are that in large part because of Joe Burrow. Yeah, they have a great set of skill people. They've got some components on defense that really get your attention. But in Joe Burrow, the Bengals think, or at least the Bengals fans, perceive a franchise quarterback, a guy that can lead them to the promised land. He almost did it a year ago. Anything less this year is going to be a disappointment, don't you think?
Now, I like the fact that you said that this is relative, because that case you made for Joe Burrow, I do agree with. But at the same time, when you're talking about Mitch, he's replacing Ben Roethlisberger. We know what that means. He also has the young rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett, who the fan base is really behind. So for Mitch, I think that for him, he has to understand that every throw he makes is going to have some type of reaction, whether it be positive or negative. Everything that he's going to do out there is going to be heavily scrutinized. So even though Joe Burrow is coming off of the Super Bowl performance, and yes, they're trying to get back and prove that that's not a fluke, I personally think that Mitch has a lot more internal pressure because of that unsettling feeling that, man, am I going to be QB1 this whole season, or do I have to look over my shoulder at some point?
Yeah, and I think for myself, when I look at it, I think, you know, both you guys make compelling arguments. I think both of them have their merits, but it's one thing to come in off of quote unquote a changing of the guard with Mitch Trubisky versus Joe Burrow, who has to now beat his own expectations. So, you know, both of them are pressures that can either burst pipes or create diamonds. I just don't know, as we look, the last time you had a back-to-back even like appearances of a Super Bowl team is Tom Brady. I mean, that's the guy who does it. And I don't know if Cincinnati is necessarily built that way, but the fan base is experiencing that as they have, you know, waited so long to get to the Super Bowl. So I would put that pressure more so on Joe Burrow, because I think for Mitch has that scrutiny that's going to be on him, but we also named him a team captain for the year. So I think that gives him a little bit of a longer leash than we would initially have anticipated had he not been a captain.
And guys, some of those intangibles that Coach Tomlin talks about, Joe Burrow is known as Joe Cool, but you see the same thing for Mitch Trubisky. He is one of those guys that you can see just takes command of the huddle, something we've seen through training camp and also the preseason. And as you said, being voted a team captain for a guy that just came in here in April is a pretty big deal. But knowing that the Bengals offense is high-powered, we know what their weapons are like. What does the Steelers offense need to do, Mike, to take care of the ball and not let them dominate and score 41 points?
Now, you said it, take care of the ball. I mean, it's got to start with not turning it over. The Steelers think they're going to be pretty good on defense this year. Mike Tomlin said at the outset of training camp he expects them to be dominant. So what do you do? First and foremost, don't beat yourself. Don't put it on a tee for Joe Burrow and all those offensive weapons. Control it if you can. Chip in with a field goal where you can. Maybe pop a big play or three when you can. But first and foremost, don't mess it up.
Arthur, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sorry, what do you think this Matt Canada offense is going to look like, knowing he was the offensive coordinator last year, but different quarterback with different skills this year, and also knowing there's a lot of new moving pieces, especially along the offensive line?
Yeah, I think we already saw glimpses of what his offense is going to look like this preseason with some of the pocket movement, getting these guys on the run where they're getting a throw or run option. I think we're going to see some of that. I think we'll also see some of the bigger body personnel groupings, 2 tight end sets, where they're able to not just protect the offensive line and assist them when we're talking pass protection, but also get a little bit extra push in there when we're talking about the run game, because I do think this team is going to still want to have a physical demeanor, a run-first mentality, because that's ultimately going to go back to what Prisuta just said in terms of protecting the ball. The more you're able to run that ball, you're minimizing the chances of negative things happening, whether you're talking strip sacks or interceptions. When you're trusting Najee and you're allowing him to be the bell cow, which we fully anticipate him being again this season, I think those are some of the things that if you're Matt Canada, he's going to be trying to take that approach, but you're still going to take your shots downfield. But that's ultimately how I see his offense looking this season.
Max, in terms of Najee Harris going against Joe Mixon, of course, they're not going head-to-head, but two guys who are known for their stats and what they're able to produce in the run game. What does Najee need to do in year 2?
Well, I think for Najee, it's going to be, how far that offensive line can take him, because we knew that last year Najee was breaking tackles in the backfield to get to the line of scrimmage and to get to just zero. So the growth of that offensive line and how fast they can gel is really going to carry them, because I thought Najee's vision was good. He made the best out of certain situations, but it's going to be getting back to that line of scrimmage and just continuing with the vision that he has. I think he's a complete all-around back. So if the run isn't working for you, you know that he's a viable option in the passing game, either via screens or via some type of delays or checkdowns. Najee's a great adept ball catcher as well. And so I think you have to kind of mix it up and not get so predictable to where you're getting the 8-man box dropping in on him on known rundowns and being able to utilize the play action. But it stems from being an effective run team first, so that you can free up those different options. And I think for Najee, it's just staying healthy. Number one, stay healthy.
All right, it is time now for our Week 1 opening lines presented by Unibet. So let's take a look at those. The first game kicks off tonight, in Unibet Sportsbook is an official sportsbook partner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you are in PA and you're ready to place wagers on any of this weekend's matchups, download the Unibet PA app or simply visit pa.unibet.com. Coming up here on the Matchup Show, we're going to talk about that dominant defense.
You took that down already. Oh, that was a beautiful thing, Missy. That was a beautiful sight.
The dominant defense Coach Tomlin is expecting for 2022. Put on your chef hat, guys. I want to know your ingredients and how long it will take to bake. We will be right back. Welcome back to the Matchup Show presented by Unibet. Let's talk some Steelers defense. Mike Prisuta, good thing you are on hand, because it was on your very DVE morning show that Coach Tomlin started the dominant talk. So maybe explain that to us in case if somebody is not aware yet.
Yeah, it was kind of an innocent question about how much the defense was going to be expected to carry the load, at least early in the season, based on continuity there versus all the changes on offense. And Mike Tomlin just went into, I'll say, a soliloquy about how high his expectations were. He used the word great. He used the word dominant. He said they not only have the people to be those things, but they have the coaches, the schematics. And I assume that was a reference to Brian Flores joining the staff and a new defensive coordinator in Terrell Austin. So they think they have the chess pieces, and they think they have the guys that know how to use them. And it got me kind of reconsidering my expectations for the defense in terms of a ceiling. And I got to say, as camp played out and what we saw in the preseason, I think that's certainly attainable. I'm not predicting it necessarily, but I can see why Mike Tomlin is thinking that high in terms of what his group could accomplish on D.
Moats, you're our defensive expert on the panelists today. What are some of the ingredients, and then what's the recipe to see this play out on the football field?
So for when you're talking about the recipe, it starts up front. The two players that I think have the best matchups and who I also think are going to provide that wave for the defense to ride is Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. You have TJ Watt, the reigning defensive player of the year, going against La'el Collins. La'el's a good player. He is not able to block TJ Watt for 4 quarters and keep him off the stat sheets the way that we know TJ can be. The next matchup is Cam Hayward versus a rookie guard in Cordell Volson. To me, that's a matchup where Cam continues to win that. Cam is going to dominate that, and I think that's going to make it extremely difficult for this Bengals team to, number one, protect Joe Burrow, but number two, to establish that effective running game, which we saw the second time we played them last year. We stopped that run. I think that changes a lot for this team. I think that when you're talking about having that Bengals offensive line, even though it is revamped, it still is not a great offensive line. It's not a great unit across the board. I think when you make them one-dimensional and you give guys like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward a chance to really pin their ears back, I think that's how they provide that recipe for this team to not just be successful, on the defense side of the ball, but ultimately to lead their team to victory. And that's the part for me that I think really boils down to TJ and Cam dominating their matchups, which they are more than capable of doing.
Max, are we putting all these ingredients following Arthur's recipe into an easy bake oven and it'll be like the Buffalo performance week 1 last year where it seemed to come together very quickly, or do you think this is going to have to bake for a little bit?
I think you might have to slide the easy bake around. I think you might have to use the toaster oven. I think it's going to take, it's not quite full-on crock pot, 6 hours, sit and forget it. But I think, it is going to take time because I think, what we saw in camp with some of the different personnel groupings and some of the new guys fitting their way in to this offense, like Miles Jack. I thought Miles Jack was an immediate fit, but we also saw Devin Bush kind of take some time to get back into his form, and him and Robert Spillane splitting time. So for that core unit of 7 is going to be very important. But I look at the backups behind them, and I think of Malik Reed, Jameer Jones. They weren't in camp with us, and they're going to take time because obviously people need a break every once in a while. So how they manage when those guys aren't in, when Isaiah Loudermilk steps in for Cam Hayward to take a break or two, to make sure that nothing changes, everything looks the same, nothing to see here, business as usual. And I think that might take a couple of snaps, a game or two before they fully get into it. But I think, man, across the board, like Arthur said, I think they have the matchup advantage. And also that offensive line that they went and bought this offseason has not played together. So therefore, it's great. I can go get a Super Bowl champion from here. I can go get a Super Bowl champion from there, pull in Kappa and Karras. But at the end of the day, Kappa and Karras have not talked to each other in a live fire situation. So they've got some bonding to do and some melding to do. And I think when you think of a unit as veteran as the Steelers defensive line, that's where you take advantage. And it's going to be one up front and applying pressure as usual against Joe Burrow.
One of the wild cards here, guys, and I'm really looking forward to see how this plays out. Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of limited last year because of what they didn't have on defense. He was basically the center fielder, a safety by definition. But before DeMonte Casey got hurt, we saw some experimentation with 3 safety looks in the secondary, and we saw Minkah Fitzpatrick moved around more in the preseason. We saw him playing up in the box or around the line of scrimmage. Now, KZ is out for at least 4 games. Do they have somebody that can play that similar role that would free up Fitzpatrick more? I talked to Fitzpatrick a little bit about this the other day, and he said, hey, I can still ball hawk from center field. I don't have to move around, but I think he can be a player of the year candidate if they can figure out ways to put him in advantageous situations to go make plays, exploit matchups, keep the quarterbacks guessing. You already know what TJ Watt can do. You already know what Cam Hayward can do. It looks like Miles Jack has showed up as advertised. There are a lot of established quantities on that defense, but I think Minkah Fitzpatrick can find that game he was playing early on in his Steelers tenure and not the game he was playing last year out of necessity. And if he does that, that kind of changes the dynamic, does it not?
Oh, in a huge way, it absolutely does. And when you're talking about who that potential third safety could be, obviously we wanted it to be Damontae Kazee, just based on the productivity that we were seeing from him, not just on the practice field, but obviously in stadium. But the guy that I would say don't forget about is Trey Norwood. I thought that he had a really good camp, a really good offseason and preseason as well. And you can see the growth and development in terms of his above the net game. Some of the things that he's seeing now pre-snap, putting himself in position, just playing faster. You know, those are some of the things that made him an intriguing prospect when we drafted him a year ago. To me, I think that he's a guy that maybe not early on, but when you're talking about as this thing continues to progress and you get that more comfort level between him and Terrell Austin and stuff like that, I could see him potentially sliding in there and giving them that chance to have that flexible three safety look as well.
All right, since we're talking about this, go ahead, Max.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, I agree with that. And I think, Miles Killebrew as well. If you're using more of the back cloud coverage where you're allowing Minkah to kind of rove, I think Miles is a great guy that can be off on the backside, but he can also play down in the box and he can be a nickel type backer for you. So I think there are some options there. And I think that's why they kept as many DBs as they did, because you want to keep that flexibility and be able to present that three safety look.
All right, since we're still talking about Steelers defense, time for a little over-under. And the first one is our Yins Chat predictive question that you can download the Steelers mobile app and go to Yins Chat and answer questions daily. They are updated as well. So guys, you'll each answer this one. Over, under, TJ Watt will have 1.7 sacks in Cincinnati. Mike, you're first.
Over.
You want to explain why?
Because he's really good, and I think the guys
Because he's Defensive Player of the Year?
The guys did a good job of pointing out that it's an advantageous matchup. And I think the Steelers are going to do a better job stopping the run, and I think that they're going to be in a better position. It's hard to tee off on the quarterback in a game you're losing 42-10, but I think they're going to be in some positions where they can get after Joe Burrow, and I think that's going to take place. I mean, you look at Watt's production. When he's in and can play an entire game, he's going to get his number. So, yeah, I'll go over.
All right, Moats.
Yeah, for me, I like the over as well. I was a little taken aback, the 1.7. I wasn't sure how that worked out versus like the 1.5, but either way, I'm with it. It could have been 2.3 sacks. I would have said
you have half sacks, Arthur, so you can't.
So it's all good.
You can't have 1.5. You got to break the tie there.
It's like, I get it, man. We're going to roll with it. It is all good. But, yeah, for me, man, I think that this team will be better against the run. You talk about the additions of Larry Ogunjobi. You talk about Chris Wormley, Isaiah Loudermilk, obviously being a lot older now in this system. I just think that across the board, they're not going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage like they've done the past year and stuff like that. And I think when you're putting them in positions where they're going to be forced to throw the ball, forced to be behind the sticks at times, that's where TJ Watt is really going to be able to thrive. And he doesn't want to just be sitting as the person that tied the NFL sack record. No, he wants to own that NFL sack record. So all of these games are going to matter, and every sack he can get is going to matter. So I do anticipate him having over 1.7, 1.8, and 1.9 sacks this week.
Max, don't go against the grain. Tell us what you're thinking.
I'm going against the grain because I feel like they're going to call one of those sacks a TFL.
There you go. Just like in Baltimore.
They do that.
Go
They
ahead
do
and
that.
twist it
They
in.
do that.
They don't want to. They don't want to have it. But no, I think TJ has an opportunity to get 2+ sacks in this game. I think Lyle Collins as a former offensive lineman watching his game, he's good run blocking. He's okay play action type of passing where he can short set you. But when it comes to that vertical 45, getting in known passing situations, he struggles a little bit to keep his edge. And I think that's something that's going to play well because TJ's motor just is one that won't let him quit at any moment. And I think he can circle the wagons around Lyle and kind of get to affecting him a lot more. And I think our secondary is going to be a lot more stout when not presenting those windows for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd as much, just because of the complications that Terrell Austin is going to bring in to that defensive secondary and the mix of coverages that they run.
And not to mention the only game last season that Joe Burrow was not sacked at all was when TJ Watt was dealing with a groin injury and did not play. Let's move to another one in Prisuta. I'll give this one to you since you're on the Minkah Magic train. Over under 4.5 takeaways for Minkah in 2022.
Oh, you know where I'm going with this. I'm going over. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick has a chance to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. And some things have to happen for that to happen. Again, they got to figure out how they want to use him and if they can use him aggressively, but I think they will. And I think this guy's going to be a dynamic player all year.
All right, Max, one for you. Over under Najee Harris with 100 yards rushing on Sunday.
I'm going to go over. I really believe that the offensive line in a position where they can take the fight to them and kind of slow down Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard on the edges. I think Kevin Dotson and James Daniel have enough beef in there to deal with the DJ Readers and the BJ Hills of the world. So I really like Najee to get over 100 in this game.
All right, Moats, not including a matchup involving TJ Watt since we've already gone over that one. What matchup are you looking most forward to on Sunday?
Oh man, the matchup I'm looking most forward to is Pat Freiermuth versus these inside linebackers, whether it's Jermaine Platt or Logan Wilson. I think that Pat is primed to have a really breakout season. We saw some of the things he did last year, and he finished with a really impressive year, and we all felt like he still had a lot left on the table. I think for him, he's just scratching the surface, and that's a matchup that I think early on, Mitch is going to be able to lean on to just keep those sticks moving, and we'll eventually see Pat continue to blossom into that player that we all know he can be. But that's the one for me that I'm looking forward to the most.
See, that's why Moats is a Hall of Famer, because he sees that with that kind of clarity. But I got one for you. It's not necessarily a traditional matchup, but you know, Larry Ogunjobi played for the Bengals last year, and a big part to me of the success that Hubbard and Hendrickson had rushing outside was Ogunjobi's ability to push the pocket back inside, not give the quarterback anywhere to step up. I think he had 7 or 7.5 sacks himself. He was an underrated component, I thought, Larry Ogunjobi, of what the Bengals were able to accomplish on defense last year. Conversely, he's playing for the Steelers this year. I think now he benefits, or T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith benefit from the push that Ogunjobi is expected to get, and the Bengals are not going to have that. I wonder if they can recreate it somewhere. Max, I think they got a draft pick from Florida. Is he the guy?
Oh, there we go. There we go. We have to bring that in. Yes, Zach Carter.
Yeah,
is that interior? He's the smallest of the 3 interior guys that they have.
So can he get up the field a little bit?
He can't get up the field. The question is, he's still a rookie, and I think playing the style that they're going to want to play in Cincinnati, he's going to have to pick and choose his opportunities. I think he can be blocked up pretty easily, and I think that task is going to be mainly on James Daniels more often than not. And running down the middle is kind of one of his hallmarks. He's a bull rush type of guy, but I don't know if he has enough lead in the pencil right now. I think he might have to have a couple of cheeseburgers or maybe some Montgomery and ribs in his system. Definitely not Skyline chili.
I think Larry's okay in that department.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's going to be, more so BJ Hill. I think that's a bigger body that gives people problems because he is a space eater. And, and obviously DJ Reader did what DJ Reader did a year ago. I think he's more for your rundown situations, but I think BJ Hill's a guy they're going to look at first to try and mimic what Ogunjobi brought.
All right, well, we have the best Steelers coverage coming your way on Sunday. Of course, take a look. The BetMGM Steelers kickoff pregame show begins at 11:30 on KDK TV locally. Of course, kickoff at 1 o'clock on CBS. Then your neighborhood Ford Store Steelers Extra Point postgame show. Immediately following the game, just flip over to the Pittsburgh CW. All right, to all my M friends, thanks so much for joining me here today as we previewed Steelers at Bengals. Thanks for joining us, everybody at home, from the Matchup Show. We'll see you guys next week.